I feel like you should take your woman and child and get lost.
Do you?
You could give something to Jack. It's that or... Well, I don't see no way out of this.
But what about loyalty?
Be loyal to what matters.
What are you gonna do?
I'll be okay, but do it for me. It would make me feel good, if that makes any sense.
A little, but...
Listen to me. When the time comes, you gotta run and don't look back. This is over.
Many things have fallen into scrutiny and reevaluation after Arthur's tuberculosis diagnosis was revealed to him. Arthur made many mistakes in his life, a life that he wasn't even entirely sure he spent doing what was right. No matter how much he believed in his cause towards the gang, towards Dutch, towards his family, a firm belief in something doesn't invalidate the questionable morality of your actions. Ethics that have been all too easy for him to cast aside. We may not know how exactly Arthur was in his youth or what his greatest misdeeds in the years before the events of Red Dead Redemption 2 were, but we definitely get a good glimpse of how far he was all too willing to go. How Arthur treats the poor souls who have unwillingly agreed to Leopold Strauss's loan terms is a good indication. Thomas Downs and Mr. Roble, I think, are the biggest victims. Roble doesn't even speak English.
The Kaiserreich.
I don't speak German neither. I'm here for money. Money.
And presumably has little to nothing just based on his decision to accept money from Strauss. A contract with terms that are always in the most unfavorable conditions for the people who decide to take it. And we know they're so unfavorable because there's a couple different sources, one of which was Winston Holmes, who even told Strauss giving him money is a risk since he has no means of getting any money for himself, let alone paying the gang what he owes them.
Hey, you knew it was a risk.
I didn't know nothing. Your name's all I knew.
Well, the German-speaking fella then, Mr. Strauss, he knew my work situation was precarious, that this whole thing was a risky venture. Sir, I'm merely stating, a man without a job, with limited prospects, at those rates, repayment was by no means guaranteed. I said I'd do my best, and I did.
Gwen Hughes straight up resorts to grave robbing just to pay his debt once Arthur pays him a visit. Point is, Arthur, through just the various money-lending missions, proves time and again that he is Dutch's greatest enforcer. Strong, loyal gunman, with little room for sympathy or understanding for regular people. And if your name is in the gang's ledger, or is even on the bad side of his leader, Dutch van der Linde, there's no hope of a pass, no hope for forgiveness, no hope at mercy. That is, of course, until Arthur gets sick. Arthur's rapidly declining health, compounded with Dutch's continuous poor and reckless decision-making, along with the deep emotions tied to dwelling on the absence of Hosea, his other adopted father's life being lost, and the price of Sean, Lenny, and countless others being killed, all for nothing. Arthur's priorities were beginning to be replaced, and along with it, his mentality. Gone were the days of blind obedience to the gang, to Dutch and his vision of a dream for a world that was rapidly fading away. Now was the time to do as much good, and save as many people as he could before his time was gone. Arthur began to question Dutch's leadership, where the gang has currently found themselves in, and many situations leading up to the events of Beaver Hollow. Everything in Arthur's life became scrutinized and doubtful. Without Dutch's vision, without Dutch's blessing, without the comfort of at least having some kind of belief, Arthur had all the time in the world with no set death date. A death date that was given with the contraction of tuberculosis. Arthur began to question who he really was. What had he really stood for this entire time? What was truly for the gang and what was really just Dutch being self-centered, focused on what he wanted, achieving his own will and using the members of the gang driven by the unanimous love for Dutch and the cause of living wild and free, with Dutch being the only one that can make that dream a reality. Arthur begins to have regrets and sympathy. This is apparent through in-game dialogue with strangers found in the world, characters in the main story, and even in Arthur's own personal journal. A vital piece of insight into the mind of our otherwise blockheaded protagonist. And just like his various actions throughout his life, his mentality and opposition towards those who were seen as nothing more than obstacles in his way, obstacles that wanted nothing but the worst for him, Dutch, and the overall gang's well-being. One such person who was placed inside this camp was Colm O'Driscoll, and possibly was even seen as the biggest supporter for the gang's downfall. Unfortunately, as far as direct one-to-one interactions between Colm and Arthur goes, there's really only one in the game, that being the time Arthur was captured by Colm's men, in an attempt to use Arthur as bait for the real prize, Dutch. Colm's plan was to capture Arthur, keep him prisoner inside his own camp, waiting for the moment Dutch realized what had happened to him, expecting Dutch to then understand the meetup was nothing more than a trap he walked into, giving Colm exactly what he wanted. Being played for a fool by Colm would undoubtedly be something Dutch would not take lightly. Something Colm was counting on. With Dutch and most likely Dutch's most wanted gunmen by his side on a rescue mission, the law would be waiting for all of them, giving Colm a pardon for his own crimes. Whether if it was as simple as being at the mercy of Colm, Arthur was strung up, had a gunshot wound to his shoulder, was completely disarmed, damn near stripped naked, and held in the center of a heavily armed camp after all, with no foreseeable chance to escape. Or maybe it was because Arthur decided to have a moment of clarity, grasping the concept long ago that the time of outlaws and lawless lands are long gone, and the feud between Colm and Dutch should just be dropped because they got bigger problems. Perhaps it could have been a mixture of the two. Either way, Arthur chose to reason with Colm instead, telling him even if he does decide to lead Dutch into a trap, handing his longtime rival over to the law would not excuse him in the long run, in their eyes. It may buy him some time, but they'll soon be hot on his own tail.
Let me go, Colm, and end all this crap between you two. We all got real problems now.
The way I see it, they get him, they forget about me.
They ain't the forgetting sort.
It's a moment of reason. There's no emotional outburst from Arthur, no hate, no real mocking or attempt to rile up Colm. Arthur does play dumb about the killings at 6 Point Cabin, but he still doesn't argue or try to shove Dutch's philosophy down Colm's throat. There's almost no real animosity towards Colm either, and with this being the sole direct interaction between the two of them, it's hard to accurately say what Arthur's position towards Colm really is. And hear me out on that. The reason why this is even brought up is because Arthur dwells on his own position towards Colm. This is said directly from his own journal. The mission Goodbye Dear Friend is all about the execution of Colm and Saint Denis. Arthur, Dutch, and Sadie attend the execution to not only watch but ensure the execution is a success. This event is reflected on in Arthur's own journal, and the entire entry has some interesting things to talk about. It's an entry that really discusses more how Dutch reacted to Colm's death. Arthur says he's back to himself and he hopes that this helps calm Dutch's recent behavior. Hopefully it'll help bring him back to how he used to be, but at the very least, for the time being, he can be normal even for a little while. Arthur then continues by saying he, unlike Dutch, doesn't feel anything. He feels the same. The exact passage reads, "I guess I felt the same. He weren't ever exactly my fight, really, and now my fight is real different, with a different enemy, one I cannot see, nor put a bullet into. Him and his boys was our fault, alright, but did we ever exist, or were we just a group of individuals, each just falling for Dutch's dumb bluster? Feel like I don't know nothing no more. That whole life of certainty is over. My code that I lived and killed by, was it true? Or was there a bigger truth I was too dumb to ever see?" With just a small piece of his own deepest thoughts and the sole interaction between him and Colm to concretely go off of, it makes it appear Arthur never had any real issues with Colm himself. When you add in every moment Colm is brought up from Dutch's own mouth, Arthur tells him it's a fool's errand. Dutch told Arthur directly, after all, that revenge is a luxury we cannot afford, and Arthur never hesitates to let Dutch know revenge is what it looks like whenever he speaks of Colm.
And the last thing we need is to get bushwhacked by Colm O'Driscoll. Let's go.
I know you hate him, Dutch.
He's here for us.
I doubt that.
No, you're just doubting me.
I would never doubt you, Dutch. You always said revenge is a luxury we can't afford.
Through the game, Arthur shows a deep level of hate towards Colm's men, but he never talks down about Colm directly. Well, you could say the hate that he shows towards his men is just an extension of what he is supposed to feel towards Colm as a man who is the bitter enemy of his leader and adopted father, or it could be just through actual run-ins with Colm's men out in the open world, and just slowly over time it solidifies the narrative that Dutch was putting in his own head about Colm. It's difficult to say, considering the feud between the two of them has been going on for years, and we're really catching the entire thing towards the tail end of it. But I do want to remind everyone that most people naturally take the sides of those they love, those who they know and trust. Dutch definitely has, or at least had, Arthur's love and unwavering trust for a long period of time. Plus, he has the gratitude of everything Dutch taught him. How to live, how to have some kind of code to operate by to separate himself from the rest of the world's bloodthirsty outlaws. And Dutch, of course, taught Arthur how to read and write. No matter how questionable of a character Dutch had, or how true his intentions ever were, we can't just forget the unbelievable amount of patience, understanding, and compassion anyone would need to have to teach someone all of that. Especially taking the time on an unruly deviant as Arthur was described to be. Arthur isn't just siding with a loved one here, he's siding with someone who he owes everything to. A man who never steered him wrong. His journal passage just reveals Colm's death was one that didn't really satisfy him personally. Dutch was the one who was finally happy to see him gone. Revealing to Arthur the pointless feud may have always been one filtered heavily through Dutch's own hate, his own hurt, anger, his refusal to let go and move on. With Arthur wrapping up this entry with talking about his own personal battle with the sickness, struggling to come to grips with the severity of it, the fragility of his own mortality, and accepting he may have been led down the wrong path most of his life. I take this as just him reflecting on yet another major part of his life tied to Dutch's own vision. This feud, this hate towards Colm was never important. Or at least, if it ever was, it isn't now. How could it be? Even if Arthur had a personal vendetta against Colm, let's just say for capturing Arthur and having Arthur suffer a gunshot wound inflicted by Colm's men. It still was pointless. How could you celebrate in the death of a man that may be as horrible as the bandit Colm O'Driscoll when you know you will be soon following him to the grave? What kind of victory is that in such a short amount of time, especially when there's so much left to do, so much left to try to do right or set relationships straight that may have been fractured due to other things being incorrectly being a higher priority? Was Colm ever Arthur's fight? In some ways, yes, because it was Dutch's. It may only have been due to Arthur's diagnosis and failing health that helped him question the depths of his own personal opposition towards Colm, but sickness or not, there would never be a halfway with Colm. That is just a symptom of the circumstances they'll find themselves in. Arthur loved and respected Dutch, valuing loyalty above everything else. The smallest parley would be a betrayal. It may be a small one, but it's still one all the same. The best they could ever hope for is Arthur just leaving this life, moving on and dropping the rivalry altogether, letting the two of them sort it out amongst themselves. Obviously, that wasn't what happened, and that would only ever happen in the most wishful of circumstances. Something Dutch would probably have to let Arthur do, otherwise he would see it as Arthur just stabbing him in the back, and that may also be a thought Arthur probably can never live with. Besides the run-ins with Colm's poorly regulated gang and Dutch continuously reminding Arthur and everyone else how horrible of a person he is, Arthur appears to have no personal resentment towards Colm. Even if he did, Arthur's mentality towards the matter was already shifting as early as Horseshoe Overlook, long before his health got to the point of him coughing up blood uncontrollably or being visibly unwell. Arthur appeared to have understood the gang's way of life is already on the way out, and everyone on the wrong side of the law should really band together for protection or acquire enough money to just disappear.
Dutch says that we...
Dutch says a lot. That's his gift. Saying things.
Oh, yeah? What do you mean by that?
I was the prize pony once. Now I'm the workhorse. Listen, Dutch is... But, well, you was at that thing in Blackwater. We already seen Pinkertons here. New century's coming. This life, this way, well, we're the last, I reckon. And we ain't long for it.
And that's the way it goes, I guess.
For me, yes.
Later on in the game, it just becomes a trivial matter of how important Colm's demise really was. Arthur's mentality is way too preoccupied with other things. He does question how much of it was really his or the fight of others, but the real question we should ask ourselves is how much of it was personal? Or how big of a priority was the death or some type of justice equal to that of his crimes? Considering Arthur felt nothing in the end, I'd say it was a low one. A low one that unfortunately Arthur had to spend the rest of his life reflecting on how much of his time, how much of his resentment or any type of detest of anyone that rode with Colm was genuine, or how much of it was planted by Dutch, the man Arthur gave his entire life to. Like usual, I want to hear what you think down below. And I want to take this time to not only thank you for watching this video, and of course it's in entirety, do share your thoughts about it as well. Did you enjoy it? Anything I missed? What other topic would you love me to cover next? But I also want to take this time to not only wish all of you a Merry Christmas, celebrate it, but a Happy Holidays. And a giant thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching these recent videos. It really does mean a lot. But until next time, see you on the next video.